My dad's ex-girlfriend robs us and he gets even. Hi everyone. I haven't been on Reddit for more than a week, but I had someone say I should tell my story here, so please don't criticize it too much as I am not the best at writing. Okay, for reference, I was a young teen around 14 or 15. My father had a rough time with women and always seemed to have bad luck with them. Until he started dating an old high school friend that we'll just call Susan. She was a cool woman. I was glad my dad found love in his life again. He deserved it. Susan was kind to me and even had 2 kids of her own, one younger and one older than me, but they didn't come around often. My dad dated her off and on for over a year, thinking he was super lucky. But soon we started having problems that escalated until the breaking point. I'll start from the beginning and you'll see that I'm not lying when I say that Susan is an evil woman. Susan is a struggling drug addict that my dad knew about and had tried to help her through it, but she was always fighting him on it and had moments of pure rage. I hate when people yelled and fought with each other. I'm kinda emotional and I start getting weepy. IDKY. Anyway, my dad had a bad accident when he was hunting behind our woods behind our house. He was coming down and halfway down he fell and perfectly landed one of his legs on a rock that completely shattered his kneecap. He had to have surgery and go on heavy pain medication to keep him comfortable 3 weeks, and he came home but needed crutches for months and still had some heavy pain meds. Enter Susan, who was hardly around the hospital during my dad's entire stay. She would end up sneaking my dad's pills when he was asleep and just abuse them all the time. My dad ended up hiding them from her. That was the moment things went downhill. First, she tried to convince me to steal my dad's meds so she could take them, saying that if 2 or 3 go missing he won't know. I was appalled at what I was hearing. I refused and I thought her behavior was out of line, but my dad still believed she was a good person. Next, I have to admit that I suffer from low self-esteem and emotional anxiety from time to time. It was a while after the pill issue that Susan came and was trying to convince me to run away from my dad because he didn't care about me anymore. I was in a bad time in my life and she succeeded in making me do just that. I did come back afterwards when I was found on the road by police. She was turning me and my dad against each other and got us literally yelling at each other, but we resolved this, and after some reflection we both realized that for all the major problems we have had happen, Susan was the instigator. My dad promised she'd be gone soon. And wouldn't you know it, Dad found out she was actually cheating on him. He walked in on her and her ex when he went to her place to break up. It made his choice a lot easier. Susan was gone. We finally had our lives back. Or so we thought. One day I came home from school and went into our house to find that it was completely trashed. I was shocked and confused and didn't know what was going on. My dog was acting normal and happy to see me, but everything was wrecked. I looked around and saw my Xbox 360 and we were stolen along with most of my games. My dad's room was also in tatters, so I decided to call my dad to ask what was going on. A family friend actually showed up during this and looked around too. My dad rushed home and was absolutely furious when he went inside. Our friend left and dad checked around and noticed that only his pills were stolen from his room. We knew instantly that it was Susan. Our dog was acting normal because she knew Susan and was used to her. That's how she didn't get mauled by our dog and was able to rob us. Instantly my dad began to figure out what to do. I suggested that we call the police, but my dad refused. He called dibs. Being ex-military, even with a bad leg, made him a dangerous man to f over. He found out that her ex, a Russian dude that's a wannabe gangster, helped rob us. My dad acted as swiftly as possible, and to be honest, I was scared. I thought he'd literally kill the both of them. It took for days for my dad to find out where they were staying. They moved in together at his house. My dad told me to stay home and drove over there at night with a baseball bat and his favorite pocket knife. Around midnight he came back and I saw stuff in the back of our car. He told me that my consoles were sold away and he couldn't have gotten them back. I asked what happened and he sat me down. He had went down and found that both of them were there that night and he honked his horn real loud and they came out. Susan didn't recognize the car in time and her ex, let's call him Tim, got scared to death as my dad got out, bats in hand. Now this dude was supposed to be a badass gangster that would beat anyone down. And my dad was only just recovered enough to not need crutches anymore. So in favor of odds, you'd expect Timmy to be itching to fight, knowing he'd win. But he caved in. My dad had a reputation of being the guy who'll beat down anyone who with our family. He has beaten a few people around town that has hurt our friends or family. Tim apparently got on his knees and begged for his life, and that he'd do anything. And my dad, being the son he is, told him to strip and give him all his clothes. Tim couldn't tear them off fast enough. Susan was about to go onto the house, presumably to call the police, when my dad told her not to move, or he'd beat him to death. He grabbed the clothes and told them to never come near our house again, or else. He also assured them that he'd be back. I was shocked, but glad my dad didn't kill anyone. He told me that I wasn't going to school tomorrow because I was coming with him to Susan's house. So the next day at noon we show up and Tim immediately him in his bedroom. My dad told me to get the big cardboard box he loaded up yesterday. We went in and he told Susan that he was taking their DVD collection. He went over and told me to take them all, which I did, albeit reluctantly. I was a bit uncomfortable with the situation, but was in awe of how badass my dad was being. He yelled for Tim and that dude ran right in like a dog and sat down on the couch. My dad told him he had a week to get out of our town. If he didn't he'd have a bad time. Tim agreed profusely, and my dad and me walked out. But before we left my dad stopped and turned to Tim and told him to strip again and give him his clothes. I watched slack-jawed as Tim hurriedly pulled his clothes off and gave them to my dad. We eventually went home. They never called the cops. Too afraid I guess. Of the authorities or my dad. I don't know which. But we haven't heard from them since. Good riddance.